Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
Hello there once again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Assembly Update. I am Mike Falvo, and joining me once again, possibly for the last time this legislative session, representing the 81st Assembly District out of the Bronx, Assemblymember Jeffrey Dinowitz. Sir, always a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to be here. I guess maybe this will be the last time.
This will, well, for this session anyway.
I don't know that we'll have time next week.
So a lot going on in the very limited time that we have left this session. Now, as we look forward to the end of session coming up here very soon, what are some of the major priorities that you're focusing on, not just for your district, but for the Assembly as a whole?
Well, there are some big issues that haven't been resolved yet, and that's normal. Very often, a lot of the big issues before the legislature get done at the very end. And all too often, one issue getting resolved depends upon something else happening as well. And then very often, we pass a number of things in one big fat bill on the last day of session, which may seem like a bad way to do things, but it gets things done. And of course, one of the most contentious issues before us is mayoral control of the New York City school system. That's been an issue which has been around since I was a little kid. When I guess it was maybe in 1968, give or take, when there was a lot of controversy in the city over a proposed decentralization of the New York City school system and the creation of ultimately 32 school districts. There were these three, I guess I'll call them experimental or pilot school districts in the city. Much controversy, teacher strikes, a lot of turmoil. But what did remain in place all those years was the overall structure of the schools system in terms of the Board of Education. The Board of Education consisted of a number of appointees of the mayor and of each of the borough presidents, and they ran the school system. And that was something that mayor after mayor wanted to change, and ultimately under Mayor Bloomberg that was changed, and a system was created involving direct mayoral control over the school system, just as the mayor has control over other city agencies, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health, and so on. And it was promised that that would change things. Has it? That's debatable, but we've had mayoral control now for approximately 20 years. So it's not something that, we can't tell if things have changed for the better. It's only been a year or two. But what's happened is when the legislature authorized mayoral control, it does so for a limited period of time. 4 years, 3 years, 1 year. I mean, each time it's different. So Mayor Adams would like direct control by the mayor of the schools to be extended. I'm sure he'd like it to be permanent. But what they've asked for and what the governor tried to pass in the state budget was a 4-year extension of mayoral control. And that didn't happen in the budget, nor should it have happened in the budget. It's not a budget issue. But it's something which I fully expect will be resolved. And by the time this show is aired, I'm sure it will have been resolved. If I were a guessing person, and I don't like to make predictions, but I would guess we will renew a mayoral control, perhaps not for 4 years, but I expect it will be renewed. There might be some changes in some of the specifics in terms of the Panel for Education Policy, the PEP, for example, which is a citywide body, but it's not like the old Board of Education, where the mayor did not have direct control over it. The mayor only had a few of the appointments. In this case, the mayor does make the appointments and currently can remove somebody if he doesn't like how that person is about to vote, which kind of suggests to me, like, what's the point then of having this? But so that's an issue which I expect will resolve. And frankly, I'm not sure why people outside New York City even have a vote on this, but they do, because it's the, it's the legislature and the governor who make that determination.
So now, when you look at let's do this. For those of us not familiar with mayoral control, like myself, I'm from upstate. I'm not familiar with it. The majority of your constituents are. Tell us some of the pros and cons behind mayoral control.
I think probably the one that proponents speak of most often, and I think they're right, is that you can hold a particular person, namely the mayor, responsible. One person is in charge, one person can be held accountable. Under the old Board of Education, you had, I forget how many people, there was one from each borough, and then the mayor, I think, maybe had 4 appointments, so I think it was probably 9 people. Who do you hold accountable for anything? No one knew who the 9 people were, except, a few people, but most people didn't know who they were. Here, we know where the buck stops. It's with the mayor. But on the other hand, and they would say that, well, if you don't like what the mayor's done, you can vote him out of office. But that's not entirely true, because we have term limits. So once a mayor is reelected, the mayor no longer has to worry about re-election. Now, of course, any mayor would want to still do right by the kids and by the school system, but the argument that you can then throw the person out of office is just not true, because term limits throws everybody out of office who are guided under the rules of term limits. So has it been effective? It's hard to know. You can argue that either way, but I would say that as a general rule, all the debate that we have over the structure of the school system, whether it's mayoral control, whether it's community school boards, Bronx boards, citywide, whatever, I don't personally believe that that's the main issue that we have to confront. I think the main issue we have to confront is the fact that a significant number of the kids are not reading at grade level and are not able to perform in math at grade level. And whatever the school structure is, I'm not sure that that's impacted that. We really need to talk about how we're going to, raise grades, raise kids' abilities, and make sure they get everything that they need to get, and make sure that we have the right things in the curriculum. We shouldn't be leaving things out, as has become commonplace. I put in a bill several years ago because I was outraged that the school system no longer mandated cursive writing, writing in script, like everybody learned. But now most kids, a lot of kids can't even sign their name. They just do some little scrawl because they were never taught that. And I think that's a bad thing. And the other thing that many, I can't tell you how many, but many schools don't even do is like drilling, making sure that kids memorize their times table, their multiplications tables, for example. These are basic skills that every kid should have, I believe. And we've kind of moved away from a lot of that stuff. There are those who will argue, what do you need cursive writing for? Everybody, is on the keyboard. Well, first goes cursive writing, then goes printing, and then kids won't be able to write at all. I don't think, just because there are new things, that students have to learn, and there are, they do have to know. Young people type like a mile a minute on the keyboard, not because they necessarily took a class in learning how to type, but because they learned it, they grew up on it. There are more things that kids have to learn now in computer skills and so on. But that doesn't mean, it's not a zero-sum game. Just because there are additional things doesn't mean we should drop other important things. So that has nothing to do with mayoral control. So I think that we're going to renew mayoral control for whatever period of time, but I do think that we really have to get down to basics. We should teach kids how to read the way kids need to learn how to read. They should be taught real math, not this fuzzy, math that doesn't necessarily teach kids the real skills that they need. Real math, to me, is what very often will be called Singapore math. where kids are learning real skills that they need and to be able to build upon as they go farther in their school career and eventually beyond school.
So now looking forward between now and the end of session, what are some of the other issues that you're looking to take head on, not only for your district, but also across the state?
I think one of the biggest issues relates to housing, and I've, of course, been among the most active legislators regarding housing issues, having been the author of the eviction moratorium 3 times, and the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, and several other pro-tenant bills. And I always like to say I'm not anti-landlord. I don't want to see people, business people not be able to make a buck. I just don't want to see windfall profits. I don't want to see bad treatment of tenants, and I certainly don't want to see people being evicted, not only during the pandemic, but at all. And so I've worked on a lot of issues relating to that, especially these past couple of years. But we have more issues. We have issues of affordable housing. The issue of good cause eviction is still before us. I support that legislation, but it's an uphill fight. And we have to find creative ways to produce more affordable housing. The Mitchell-Lama program, which started in the 1950s, was one of the greatest programs that the state has ever had as it relates to housing. And now we have programs where we're giving massive subsidies to developers, and in return we're getting a very small number of so-called affordable units of housing, and that's just not adequate. So the 421A program, which is basically a tax giveaway, handout, however you want to characterize it, to developers in return for providing a limited number of affordable units in a building, sounds good, but I think we need to do, if we're going to continue to do it, we need to have massive reforms so that we're getting our money's worth. Because right now the city is foregoing $1.7 billion, that's billion with a B dollars, every year in tax revenue as part of the subsidy to the developers who provide this very limited number of affordable units. And we have tremendous needs, we're in desperate shape, and if we're going to spend money on that, then at least let's get our money's worth. I don't think that's unreasonable. So there will be a discussion about that as we reach the end of session, and as of now, there's only a few days left, so not much time.
No, not much time at all. And, what are some other things you're hoping to focus on? We joked off air during the off season when, there's really no off season, but what are you hoping to tackle when you're not in session, when you're spending the majority of your time back home in your district?
I think to continue to do some of the stuff I've been doing, we still have many people who have been very negatively impacted by the pandemic. We do a lot of things in the neighborhood. In every corner of the district, we do giveaways of COVID test kits. We have food giveaways. There are so many people that are really struggling right now. Right on the corner where my office is, I'm on Kingsbridge Avenue and 231st Street. Across the street is a church, and they have a food pantry that every Friday people are lining up, and you see them lined up around the block, and it's heartbreaking that in the richest country on the planet that we can't do right by everybody that we have to do, and people are really struggling. It's not only with food. It's while unemployment is way down under this administration, there are still people out of work. So we have a lot of work to do still.
Exactly. Well, the finish line for this year's session is in sight. Just a few days left of the legislative session, and sir, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Representing the 81st Assembly District from the Bronx, New York, Assemblymember Jeffrey Dinowitz, I'm Mike Falvo. Thanks for joining us.